All right, 6 o'clock, we can call the meeting to order. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm filling in for Charlie. I'm Diane Romeo from the Lennox Board of Health. Charlie's a little under the weather, so he's gonna be hybrid, but you need a person who is to be the facilitator. That's what I'm gonna do. So, here's no.
Thank you, Diane.
You're welcome. Maybe. Not my cup of tea.
So that's.
I'll give y'all a chance to get seated and one can go. While we're waiting, anybody, look at the minutes if you haven't had an opportunity to. Yeah. I know you're there.
And Joanne's out there online.
Attendance wise, so.
Oh, I'm Joanne Sullivan.
John Levy.
Lies, lover.
So in reading over the minutes, if people have had an opportunity to before the meeting,
I would move that we accept the minutes with the correction as noted on attendance.
thank you.
I second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, Chi-Town, needs to go over their letter.
Yes, thank you, Diane. So, just a quick recap on how we got here today. The last Tri-Town meeting, there's discussion about individual boards and their willingness to write their own separate letter with respect to the GE proposed transportation disposal plan that came out on the 31st with public comments that were due on February 1st. Tri-Town didn't take any action at that time, sort of pending what individual boards were going to do. Lennox had met subsequently thereafter. A draft was put together. They voted and submitted their own separate public comments, which was a few weeks ago. Stockbridge met last Friday. They did something similar, not the same letter, there's some different iterations, but I think the underlying message is the same.
Yeah.
Stockbridge last Friday voted and we submitted that on the record. Lee is meeting next Monday on the 29th, which gives us a few days. So with 3 different iterations of a draft, I sort of compiled what Lennox did. Lee is still up in the air as they haven't voted on it yet. And what Stockbridge did, and I kind of just merged them all together. There's a little bit of redundancy, but I think the more comments that get submitted, the better our voices are heard and representation. Sitting in front of you tonight in draft form is basically a summary of what the 3 different boards are trying to accomplish, wording wise. I do have an original here if the board wants to have a discussion, and if there's edits, we can make edits. I'll just have to run around before the 1st to make sure I get signatures. I want wet signatures for this draft. So if the board members in person and online want to take a stab at this draft, and we'll go from there, I guess.
Is this what we saw in Stockbridge last week?
It's a little bit different, John. We added, Bob and I were having discussions about a lead draft. And we kind of put a summary. It's actually the 2nd paragraph, kind of summarizing the Lee adjudicatory hearing, which adds to the Lennox letter, which adds to the Stockbridge letter. So everything that Stockbridge wrote is actually in here, except for this paragraph with the adjudicatory. Yeah.
I was thought up short, and I apologize for that. And that I looked at this, but I did not realize that there were many things that were the same and then other things that had changed. and maybe oversights on my part. But I'm concerned about the paragraph, second paragraph on the second page, which it seems to run on a little bit, and I'm having difficulty pulling out of it exactly what was intended.
Yeah.
And thought that that particular paragraph might benefit from some editing and perhaps even sort of a redo of it.
Sure.
And I started to write down some thoughts to try to redo it, but I'm not sure I had the adequate amount of time to do it.
I mean, there's two sentences. I mean, this is the exact language we signed off on the Lennox letter after you and I.
know.
But, you know, there is a little redundancy in that paragraph. I think the second sentence could be struck. It is a little bit redundant. I don't know how, but I'm willing to listen to whatever edits and I can try to make this on the fly.
Yeah. It seemed to me that if one was trying to pull out particular strains out of that, one was perhaps the most important in my mind, was the need for a more complete and detailed study of the feasibility of rail transport or transporting the excavated materials. And then secondly, a little jab at GE about their lack of willingness to utilize that funding. But if then the turning to our representatives to look for ways of identifying and marshaling youth funds to get a better study. And lastly, of course, the hope that this would show the rail transport is feasible and hopefully will be implemented. I think that's what it's aiming at. But I think it needs some reconstruction to bring those.
Are you saying you think that that second sentence should be struck because it's a little bit of a jab or just worded differently?
I think it's it may be a little bit of a jab, but I don't think that it necessarily needs to be
Okay,
struck. I don't know the background of that, whether the fact that rail did not get much more than short shrift in discussion, whether that means that GE kind of turned their back and said, we don't want to do this.
They didn't study.
Yeah,
They
basically.
didn't put any effort into it.
Yeah, the only study that I'm aware of are the ones that the Houstonic Railroad did, which were fairly preliminary. But if one wanted to strike it, I certainly wouldn't.
just asking.
Yeah.
Diane?
You mean the idea of striking GE's lack of willingness, that piece right there, was
Yeah.
not a little inflammatory?
Yeah.
It could be a word to soften it, just they were hoping that GE would not consider, the finances being
Yeah,
something that would,
yeah.
we could just say, we hope that GE would show a willingness to utilize additional money or to appropriate.
I like it. That's a more positive view.
Making it a positive one instead of an.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
would hope that GE would be willing to
Yeah.
appropriate their financial resources.
We can, so, oh, go ahead, Bob.
I have some, when I drafted, yet to be approved Lee's letter, I struck this from Lee's component. There are two reasons. One is that I did that. One is basically what Noel's saying. It's a little confusing and it's it suggests inaccuracy. That inaccuracy is suggested by GE's lack of willingness to utilize additional funding. What's the additional funding source? It's actually GE's lack of willingness to spend more money.
Mhm.
But we don't know that yet because
Yeah.
this study hasn't been done. So until we have that, I thought this was filled with both conjecture and inaccurate language. The second thing is, the financing of it may become an argument. And I think I made the point at a previous meeting with Dean that this whole project's gonna go on for a long time. The costs are not fixed yet.
Right.
If rail is interesting and possible, those costs will just need to be assimilated. There is no set final dollar amount. So if we shift to rail primarily, then that needs to be paid for. I mean, and it's a complicated, somewhat long-winded, multifactorial approach that's necessary that I don't think this small paragraph addresses. I think the financing of it is a whole nother hour. And it's filled with conjecture because we haven't got the study yet. So I would suggest, at the risk of being harsh, to strike the paragraph.
Yep, that seems really easy.
Do you wanna make a motion?
I would make a motion to edit the letter and strike paragraph 2 on page 2
In its entirety.
in its
In
entirety.
entirety?
Second.
Just a second.
Can I step in here right after that second?
Sure.
Okay, first place, when the different boards looked at these things, the situation was somewhat different than it is now. Originally, we were all faced with the idea that this GE proposal was going to be it. We didn't really have any idea that there was going to be any EPA order to GE to look at this again. Now, from what I understand from what the EPA says, that GE will do this again. I'm not happy about GE doing it. I'd rather have UMass doing it. And I still think that's a possibility. But after GE looks at this rail again, hopefully more diligently, then we could put in the statements that you're talking about right now. So removing them now seems to be partly a response simply to the changed situation that we're in. It's considerably changed. We were trying to cover all our bets down the line without knowing in the future. We had no reason to suspect that we were going to have another public input period. EPA didn't give that to us. But now we know EPA is going to, after GE does whatever they're going to do next, give us another input thing. And I think this kind of an analysis of it at that point becomes, as Bob said, I think becomes much more relevant, in terms of looking at costs, because you see what they are. But in addition to that, I think I agree with Noel feeling a bit uncomfortable about it at this point, particularly because the scenario has changed. So I support, the motion, and I would like to see us look at the entire document in two different ways tonight. One is that the final comment period for this particular opportunity closes in 1 week. So I suggest that whatever we do tonight, we hash it out and expect it to be the final version. That's the first idea. And the second thing is, I think that looking at it the way Noel and Bob have is a good idea. Just sort of peruse it again and look at the idea about how the scenery has changed.
Can I bring up another paragraph?
Or is they want to, which time we have motion?
Yeah, we have to vote on it.
So is there a second on Bob's motion?
Yes, there was.
The other one's
All right,
first.
so if everyone
Second and
needs-
third.
So if there's any more discussion, there's no discussion vote on the
Okay.
amendment.
Can you withdraw the motion so we can review the whole letter, then make a motion at the end?
Or you just want to.
Sure, but it'll be a very long
Yeah,
motion.
just do one
Yeah,
at a
why
time.
don't we just,
I would do it one section at a
Yeah.
time if possible.
One change at a time.
Yeah, one paragraph at a time.
So I can track it too.
yeah, okay. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So that's that
Yeah.
one.
So on to the next one.
Yeah, I on the 5th paragraph on the 2nd page that begins furthermore. I there's a small editing issue, and that's the last paragraph is not a and the last sentence is not a sentence. So that would need to be fixed.
Yes.
Yep.
Which one is, I'm sorry.
Without
Without
the
the
burdens.
It says, without the burdens of increased simultaneous truck transport. It needs either a semicolon
That was
or.
probably a cut and paste problem.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but so that if it stays unedited, then that it has. an
Maybe
edit.
strike it.
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
out of way to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the body of the letter speaks to studying rail.
Mhm.
But this paragraph says, it is obvious the use of railroad will not only enable the implementation to begin earlier, but use of rail will enable, et cetera. Aren't those, do we know that? I mean, if we haven't studied it, what's?
I agree with that,
This
Bob.
timing thing.
Yeah, we
Is
don't know.
that rail is faster, if I could just finish, if rail is faster, I miss that. I don't know that assumption from my.
We don't really know
absorption.
anything about rail, because we.
Right,
well,
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
that rail is faster, and so we should urge that point. I wanna be, I mean,
Okay.
we should stick to what we know, and I just don't know that. So my point is, open to discussion, that a motion to be considered might consider either striking or fixing that last sentence, but also looking at the whole paragraph as a statement of obvious, that it's obvious. We haven't really studied it.
Yeah, comment? There are a couple of things. I think that's a very good point. In fact, at the meeting last evening, there was a comment made by one of the EPA people that, whether it's trucks or rails, it's gonna take 13 to 14 years to get this done. So there was at least an indication, a nod in the direction that rail would not hasten the project. And the other thing about this that bothered me a little bit is that my understanding has been throughout this process, and I may be wildly mistaken in this, is that the reason for doing the remediation from north to south, the flow of the river, is that as you clean up a section, whatever PCBs that might have been released at that time, resuspended, may end up in the next catchment and then on down the line, so that doing everything all at once may leave you with a heavy burden, PCB laden materials flowing down the river. Our Connecticut neighbors probably would not be happy.
Yeah,
Yes.
may I comment? I think this is an important point. This is one of the paragraphs that I was looking at when I spoke earlier about this. In the first place, we're forced in the situation we're in and trying to advocate for our community's public health into a situation where, first of all, we know that any delay in the excavation is a recognized increased hazard to the public safety. That's the first idea. We know that the EPA agrees with that and whatever. And the second problem that we have is that EPA has never looked at the rail doing this. That's another issue. So in point of fact, the idea there is that probably nobody really knows this. However, since we put this forward, EPA has insisted that there's no difference in the time of the rail versus the trucks. Now, I don't know how they know that, since they haven't done a time study with the rail. And the letter from Senator Mark and Representative Pignatelli, if you read that letter, they think that the use of rail, they've done some preliminary investigation about this, would turn the process from 13 years into 8 to 10 years. So they're suggesting that it will shorten it. I think at this point, considering the fact that the EPA has really not done a study looking at this, considering the fact that our representatives and senators say that this is a possibility, and Parker Rodriguez, the chief counsel of the Housatonic Railroad, says that they can get up and running before the dump is ready. And it's not clear exactly how long it's going to take for their planning and design to get together. I would like to change this to say that possibly the rail can do this. And instead of saying that it will, to say what Jim had in his letter, that it might do this, and that in fact, that the basic idea here is that we're advocating for rail because the possibility has not been looked at. And if there's a possibility to shave it down to 8 to 10 years, as Senator Mark and Representative Pignatelli are asserting it may be, and as Parker Rodriguez is saying from the Housatonic Railroad, I think this is a very strong reason to use rail. But I do agree that we should change this, and I would suggest in that we can say that the delay in implementation and remediation of PCB contamination in the Housatonic River endangers the public health and safety of our community. Now, we could add in there that GE, by doing a study that EPA has already deemed to be inadequate, has already delayed this. But I'm not saying that this is a new idea here. I don't want to necessarily put that in there, but we urge the EPA to consider. Right now, they seems like they've chosen. Well, they changed it. They're not going with EPA, so we can take that out. We don't have to urge them to abandon it because they're already abandoning it. They're telling GE to go back to the drawing board. So I think that some of this is important to have, but I do think that it should be changed considering the recent. I mean, it's a very big deal that EPA has now told GE they have to change what they did. Go back and look at it again. So this paragraph is obsolete in some ways.
Couldn't you just keep the part that says from the words, the use of the railroad will not only enable the implementation to possibly begin earlier than trucks before the local disposal facility has been completed, but use of railroad will also enable the concurrent excavations, therefore possibly speeding the entire implementation process up. Just add the possiblies,
Yeah.
you know,
Yep.
start with the word the, forget the first part of it, you know, the use of railroad will enable it possibly to begin sooner and possibly speeding up the whole process.
So
I like that.
So the last sentence, that's not a sentence we can
Right,
strike.
Yeah, just get that.
So there's the first sentence, furthermore, which ends in public safety of our community.
And then
It's the
take out
we urge, we
we
gotta
urge the
fix.
EPA's choice of use to trucks because it's obvious. Strike that and just start with the word the. The use of railroad would not only enable the implementation to begin earlier, possibly, or, you know, possibly begin earlier than trucks.
So you're saying we urge the EPA to abandon GE's choice to use trucks because.
Yeah, take that.
Take that, strike that,
so
out,
then-
strike that one too.
The use of railroad, so the use of railroad could
Could enable,
enable the implementation,
May
may enable.
may.
Yeah.
The implementation to begin earlier than trucks before the local disposal facility has been completed. But the use of railroad will also enable concurrent excavations, therefore possibly speeding the
Possibly, yeah.
entire implementation process up.
All right, that sounds
Sounds
reasonable.
Is there any strength in saying what Charlie's bringing up, that several people, the railroad
Marks and
it
representatives.
has been suggested, if they ask by who, we say by Marky and by the railroad. It has, furthermore, it has been suggested.
Yeah, you could say either stakeholders as a general non-naming kind of thing, or you could say Senator Marks and representatives.
And the railroad people
And
have
the-
suggested, have strongly suggested the use of railroad will not only enable the implementation begin earlier. So that gives a little bit of a bite. We're not just saying this, we have that.
I think I can wordsmith this in the
Okay.
appropriate way. So we're gonna strike out the last sentence.
Yeah.
We're gonna strike out, we urge the EPA to abandon G sentence, start with the use of railroad may
Mhm.
enable, and then add in reference that.
You can start the
Mark
sentence with, it
and
has been
Pignatelli.
suggested by Senator Mark
Well,
and the others.
Right.
That
And I
the
have
use of
the-
railroad.
And the use of railroad,
Not the
just
use of
add it before it.
Okay,
So that gives the
You got
authority.
it.
We're
you know,
just-
you know what the good news is?
It's a wrap-
The third page is just signature. I can have you sign it and change the second page later.
And I add to Noel's point that he made, which is a very good one about not doing, you know, when you work upstream, there's a certain amount of downstream transport of sediment. This was a problem, I believe, in the Hudson River that EPA went through. And it's certainly something to be concerned about. It doesn't make sense to start downstream and then have to go back and do it all over again if that's a significant problem. As again, we don't have a study in front of us telling us about this, you know, that in detail. They haven't done that with respect to the value of the potential time saving of rail let's say, transport, let's say, for example, rail with hydraulic dredging could pull all the stuff, as the Weston and Sampson at the Lennox meeting the other night suggested that they could hydraulically dredge Rising Pond and put everything on the rail right there and bring it right up. Now that, logically, since that's the furthest place downstream, you at first glance don't want to be doing something upstream after you've dredged out Rising Pond. However, there are other considerations that you need to look at before you can just simply take that black and white concept. The interesting parts of this that make it a little bit more gray are that, first of all, GE has been, I think they're actually in place what they call gauges in a couple of impoundments down the river that measure the flow of the water, and they're able to measure the PCB concentrations going over the dam. And I'm not sure how many of these they can put in place and how quickly they would be looking at them, but they're, I believe, put there to monitor the downstream transport from any given excavation area. And they have what they call performance standards. And if these performance standards are exceeded, the permittee GE will have to stop doing what they're doing until they figure out how not to be sending that much stuff downstream. And the performance standards, I think, when you look at flow and concentration, turn out to be amount, and you calculate that. The second idea that I believe is a protection against downstream transport, not even necessarily from the excavations, but let's say from flooding, is they're not going to cap any of the impoundments until the very end of all of the work. Now, with that in place, what you can say to yourself is if they have gauges and they can monitor PCB, monitor the amount of downstream transport of PCB waste and stop the excavations at any given point, how many PCBs are actually going to get downstream, let's say to Rising Pond if they already did that? And is that really a big number? Is that a number that we have to be concerned about to redredge or to do stuff like that? They need to have there's a certain trigger amount. Am I making myself clear there? So I hope so. In other words, the amount of PCBs that would go downstream really need to be clarified before it's truly a danger not to start downstream. But the other part of it, and I'll just say this is a simple factual thing, is that in the 2020 permit, EPA directs GE to do concurrent excavations if feasible. It's a direction. It's specifically there. And so that they don't say, don't do concurrent excavations. They don't do it. They actually tell GE to do it if it's feasible. So I think we're very safe by advocating for the rail's ability to handle concurrent excavations all over the place. What's good about rail is they have so many trains that they can, and put them on the sidings, they can load up the trains and then they they put them on the sidings, and then at night they take 50 or 100 cars if they want away, so that they can be doing this everywhere and handle the volume. Where trucks, if trucks were handled, if the concurrent excavations were feasible, the truckloads going through our towns, the rates would increase exactly proportionally to the amount of excavations. If we have two things going on at once, we have twice as many trucks. That's not the problem with rail. We don't have that problem. So using trucks eliminates the possibility that a concurrent excavation could be undertaken. It doesn't make it feasible because of or it makes it more difficult because of the trucks. So I think it's worthwhile to keep the concurrent idea in there.
I don't disagree with anything Charlie's saying. I just don't know if that's the purpose of this letter so much as just simply asking, please, can we have an evaluation of rail? That would be included in the study, that aspect. But this letter is really, I want to keep it focused. We're asking them to look at and evaluate the use of rail. And I don't want to take it to any
That's
other
it.
place. I just keep it single focused. We don't want to just give it to truck. We want it to be an appropriate assessment and evaluation of the efficacy of rail.
Well, we're gonna have an opportunity again, because now they're back at the drawing. Well, the goal of this public comment was to get this in before February 1st.
Right.
And then not expecting EPA last night to pull the curtains before the 1st. So in a way, like, we still want to commit to this letter, but there's gonna be a whole nother opportunity. We're gonna be sitting here a few months from now, probably doing this again in a different perspective.
The more voices, the better.
So I think I got the changes. Are there more changes?
So question, at the very top of page 2, when we talk about the quality of life compliance plan to be submitted to the EPA in December of 2023.
Yeah, so the quality of life was put out in December 2020.
So we're saying that to be undertaken, it sounds like it hasn't been submitted
Well, because we wrote this letter,
before that.
Lennox wrote the letter before the quality of life thing came out.
Do we want to
We
change?
may
it?
want to strike that, because it does sound a little bit,
Yeah, it sounds like it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. Like we're not
Um,
knowledgeable that it happened.
so maybe strike out the last 2 sentences of that paragraph.
We note that.
Everything after that, right,
Yeah,
because that was.
You got it.
so that's old.
Last year.
It's old news.
Man, I was feeling good about this letter.
That's good.
But we still leave in, we feel these issues need to
Oh,
be
yeah,
addressed as.
yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else have any comments?
Good with it.
Does someone want to make a motion?
Well,
barring
I
all
see
the
Bob
changes?
writing furiously. I don't know. I don't want to cut you off if you have something you
Busy
want
work.
to. Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, I'm just doing paragraph 5 as we discussed it for your use.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
I would ask, in the first paragraph, I'm somewhat I'd like to state what this letter is about. This letter is to request further evaluation. A statement in the first paragraph, so people read it, they're not looking at, well, what it's about, they know, first sentence, first paragraph. This letter is to state our concern about the inadequate evaluation of rail and our hope that it will be evaluated prior to the acceptance of trucks. Whatever you want to say, but somehow that first paragraph,
Yeah.
make it clear to the reader, then you have to read the rest, because the rest is just.
Yeah.
Filler, the first paragraph, this is what we're asking.
Okay.
No question.
So may I ask something? Would anybody, if you look at what EPA has said about the GE proposal, they're saying it's inadequate. And in fact, if you really study it, you see they didn't do a lot of the things that they were supposed to be doing. In a very true way, when you look at the idea that the delay in PCB excavation is a hazard in and of itself to the public health of our communities, this inadequate study by GE represents an endangerment. They have, by doing an inadequate study, endangered our communities. I wonder if we should put a statement like that in there, because I think that's a very clear fact. The EPA has said they did an inadequate study. This has been going on for months. And now we have to delay further. And I would request of the EPA that they strongly consider having somebody else do the study, because GE has already demonstrated its lack of regard for our public safety by doing this study this way. It should be competent to do a reasonable study. For it to be inadequate is not acceptable.
Do you have any wording that you think you might like to
Well,
say?
yeah, I would say my wording would be that we feel that GE has endangered the health of our communities by delaying the excavation of PCBs through a time-consuming, inadequate study, period. We hope that EPA does not allow GE to repeat this.
In some ways, isn't that stated in that, the paragraph that begins with furthermore, delay endangers the public health.
Yeah. it
So,
says-
so we have stated it, unless you'd like to state it earlier, but it does state that we feel that it endangers the public health. There's failure to evaluate.
Move that to the top.
Mm.
How about moving that to the
Yeah.
top?
That's fine, I just, it was here, if we want to take that.
With
With that-
whole paragraph.
First
Well, I
study.
would
You
probably
don't say
wordsmith it a little bit more,
Right.
move it to the top.
But
Yeah.
take that paragraph and put it further up.
That's fine.
Have that be part of the opening statement.
Yeah.
And that's the overall problem we got here, right? We waited months and months and months and we finally get an inadequate study, and now it's gonna be delayed even further when EPA says it's time to dissolve the essence.
Yeah.
How long have we just wasted time?
Yeah, but I suspect, and I've been on a little bit shaky grounds here, but I suspect that the greatest delay occurred after 2016, when the settlement at that time was appealed. That's a much greater delay than we're faced with now.
Yeah.
Having lived near Woods Pond now 40 years, and having heard back in the late 1980s about how many trucks were going to be going up Housatonic Street every day, every 20 minutes, I think was quoted to me. If they get around to dredging Woods Pond, this is what it's going to mean. It's been a long time. It's time to get this done.
Do we want to read that?
Sure.
Is this the furthermore?
Yeah.
Paragraph, all right.
Their handwriting
You wanna read
though,
it?
so.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's actually right here. Where you can't read it, it's like that.
Page 2, paragraph 5, rewrite. And so instead of furthermore, the paragraph starts. Delay in implementing the remediation of PCB contamination endangers the public health and safety of our community. Stakeholders, including Senator Marks, Representative Pignatelli, and Mr. Rodriguez, like we can fill in descriptors there, have suggested that the use of rail may allow implementation to begin earlier than if trucks are primarily utilized. The possibility exists that the use of the railroad will enable concurrent excavation, thereby speeding the entire implementation process. And then I struck the sentence fragment beginning without.
Can I just ask a question about that? Sounds really good, Bob, but how did we get to the public health and safety of our community? Shouldn't it be communities? I mean,
Yes.
we are talking about more than one community here. We're talking about Lee, Lennox, Stockbridge, wherever else. But shouldn't it say the health and safety of our communities? Because it's from the Tri-Town board. not
Yeah,
just
since
one.
it's coming from Tri-Town, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that makes sense, done.
And Bob, I have a question now. I see what you're doing with that paragraph. And we're suggesting that paragraph be the starting paragraph at the very start of the letter. Are
Instead
we
of
moving that
Yeah.
to the top of the letter?
I think that can be worded nicely to begin with.
Well, it gets back to Elias's point though, and that's that the opening paragraph should clearly state the purpose of the letter.
Right.
And the purpose of the letter, in my guesstimate, is not to point out that truck is slower than rail. That rail will allow quicker implementation. The purpose of the letter is to comment in time for the comment period with regard to GE's proposed transportation plan.
Right.
That's the purpose of the letter.
Yeah.
This is a subsection of that discusses an added advantage of looking closely and studying rail, and that advantage is don't further delay the implementation. So I'm not sure this is the opening paragraph.
No, but could complement
Could be-
that.
it could be
moved
second.
up. So the first paragraph was that this letter is to represent our community's concern about the inadequate evaluation of rail.
Right.
And that we should not automatically, how we want to say, go with truck. And then you can say the next sentence is that the delay in implementation, blah, 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 affects our health. And as these professionals said, it could make it faster and more timely. So we had the 1-2 punch. It's been an inadequate evaluation, and here's part of our thinking about that. And then everything else.
Yeah, that's good. That fits our intent.
You got that, Jim?
Got that, Jim?
It's being recorded.
Yeah.
I will do the best I can to
Yeah,
piece it together.
but I think it's important to state what the purpose of the letter is.
That was a good idea.
Yeah, I think we should do that. And I think Elias makes a good point. We could do that and then go into your
Yeah.
letter.
And then the rest of it.
It's just conflict. As they said in the book.
So
will
want
we
to make
get
a
a-
motion and second all those changes?
Yeah. Who wants to make a
I
motion?
make that motion that we accept those changes, as Jim will make them on paper.
I second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So I'm gonna have everyone sign the third page only. There's no edits on the whole page.
Okay.
I'll just pass it along, broken up by town.
You want a
Does it
blank
say
check
draft on
signature,
it,
don't you?
Does it say, so it won't matter?
Just like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Moving
All right.
on,
Yeah,
Because you can attach anything to it.
right.
it's four
Well,
unnecessary?
Yeah, well, again, this agenda was posted, you know, pre-EPA, like doing their thing. So we were gonna give updates on kind of like all the communications, the emails and whatnot.
So we're signing this without saying, you could write a letter saying my first one
That's
is
right,
more
yeah.
money.
So, Charlie and I were gonna discuss any updates on the plan, but for those that haven't been paying attention, last night at the CCC meeting, EPA announced that they were rejecting the plan before the 2/1 deadline. So that's our update.
You're signing.
I would add that I think that the use of UMass as an independent agency to study rail is still a definite, something that's being looked at. And I would look forward to that being a possible thing, even if EPA doesn't ask for it.
Even as like a master's project for them to do?
They have
Because there's so
recently
many
they've done these kind of things before.
Yeah.
When we met with Senator Mark, that was an idea that came up with reaching out to you.
How does one go about pushing
This
this
letter.
letter? Or do we?
Well, Senator Mark
Money.
basically
They could write anything.
Okay. So it doesn't get lost.
Well, at least.
It says draft.
Oh, yeah, the one we signed.
I
says
know.
that.
Luckily, I got an original right here.
Just send that
I'm
one.
sorry. I'm still trying to
Hey, we
digest
can do
all the
copies.
changes.
I sent that to him and he didn't get past it.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, thanks.
in the right place.
I would have walked in my office Monday morning like, oh. Thank you.
Number 5, COVID updates.
So Charlie and I put this on the agenda, it's just. We looked at some of the Pittsfield wastewater results from December to January. They were quite high, which is an indicator of COVID. The challenge being, we did speak to Dr. Lederer, Berkshire Medical Center, just to see what they're seeing, are they being taxed on inpatient beds and so on and so forth. And I don't know, Charlie, if you want to give an update on that, but they did implement the masking at at all BHS sites because not only COVID, but influenza, RSV, many other respiratory illnesses. I did have Jill, our lead nurse, run the Tri-Town COVID and flu numbers for like the last month, and they're pretty low. The week of 121 through this week, we had 2 influenza cases in Lenox, 1 COVID. In Lee, we had 3 influenza, 0 COVID, and Stockbridge was 0. But it's still not a good, thank you, everyone. It's still not a true indicator of what's really happening because there's a significant amount of home tests being administered. Those don't get reported. Perfect example, we had a pretty good size COVID numbers in the Lee schools a couple months ago, and speaking with the superintendent, at the time we had 3 COVID cases, and it wasn't a reflection of what was happening in the school system at that time. Teachers being out, students being out, and so there's going to be that disconnect still of understanding what truly is out there, because unless you're doing a PCR test for a procedure or in the hospital for something specific, most of the people are taking at-home tests.
These
Some
numbers.
people
are-
are, some people aren't even testing.
Yeah, and so the CDC and mass.gov guidance for isolation quarantine is still the same. Day 0 through 5 is isolation. day 6, asymptomatic through 10, masking. That hasn't changed. We still hear from the nursing home, the nursing homes will call us if they're seeing a little bit of an outbreak. There's not a lot of contact tracing anymore because it's not a requirement. And, just all I can promote is get your vaccines. We've already done tons of clinics. The collaborative through Tri-Town administered over 500 COVID vaccines. We're hoping to get some more, but they're really expensive and it's private purchase. And I know CHP and others are out there. People need to get the vaccine. Symptomatic, stay home. Contact your primary. This right here is just the current guidance that's out there. There's nothing new in there. When we were looking at the wastewater numbers, they were lower than they were this time last year, but they were very close. But according to Dr. Lederer, they're starting to come back down. We are in January, peak season. Everyone's sick. We're monitoring, and COVID's not going away. It's going to be here for the foreseeable future. We got to manage it to the best we can. And we're in a different position than we were in 2020, right? We have vaccines. There are other things out there that can help people. We're not out there fighting the COVID fight with no tools.
And people can come down and get a free test if they
We have
want
tons
to,
of them,
so
yeah.
just to spread the word around that, instead of people going to their drugstore and paying $20, which may be prohibitive for some people wanting to even bother to test, that there's free government tests.
Where do they get it?
So we get them from the government.
Where would I go?
Well, just,
Right there.
we have, we got about 3,000 left.
You have right.
Just
Yeah,
one
we
town,
have, yeah,
Tri-Town.
Okay.
we deliver, we bring them to town halls, we
Yep.
bring them to councils on aging, we do them to
That's
the
what's
schools.
Yep.
Maybe even
we
give
come
them
to the
to
county.
you
Yeah.
tonight. Even give a couple to you
Good
tonight.
night, yeah.
Right
We
there.
don't have thousands upon thousands upon thousands, but we do have them. That's really, all I have to say about COVID. It's one of those things that's not going away.
And it's not the only thing out there. The flu is all
No,
around.
RSV,
We lost people, in my extended family, yeah, for ours, this terrible, last week. Couple of days apart from each other, husband and a wife, elderly. Prominent people in the Me too, we're related, we're an extended relation, it was hard. First one was hard enough to take, but when they called and said his wife died, it was like, "Ugh." Anyway.
I don't have,
Department
I
updates?
really don't have any. I just put it in there in case something weird came up, but there's really no updates.
Can we mention that polio?
Yes, there is
From Mike Hugo,
I mentioned it prior to Stockbridge, but, the state, has an in-person, Board of Health training.
Yep.
It's at the Delaney House, March
30th.
30th. We do have funds to pay if there's a cost to that. I can send the link out once I get it. It's a really good quality training. Because as I've been saying before, the Department of Public Health have finalized workforce development performance standards for all public health, which we knew was at some point coming, meaning Zach, me, everyone else has to do additional workforce standards on top of, and Tri-Town's in really good shape from a staffing, workforce development perspective. But there's all these new things coming down our way, which are it's more work, and we want to try to get boards of health. And it's hard because boards of health are voluntary, whether you're elected or appointed, but there's so much responsibility and importance of what Board of Health members do. Having these types of trainings is really important and critical, especially when it comes down to, how to run a hearing. And I help the boards manage that, but like boards should understand how to run a hearing, understand open meeting law concepts, open meeting law violations, how we deal with housing issues, how we have to activate the emergency dispensing site. We have a lot of medical people on the board, like what does that role look like? So having that basic understanding, and there's gonna be tons of trainings coming down the pipe, so we'll try to you know, we have new board members. Board members have been doing this a long time, but, you know, we don't see a significant amount of turnover with the tri-town boards for good reason. But there's an appetite to learn more,
Yeah, and there's.
other than reading a document that's this thick, and people are busy, but it is on a Saturday, you know, food's like super good. Mother's Day brunch, Delaney House, just saying. But, you know, if I'll send that link out, people wanna go, we can cover the costs and all that, this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Any new business anybody wants to bring up at all? Yeah. Say. Then it's citizen speak time. You're in? Okay.
I don't think there's anyone online, I don't see anybody.
Anybody?
I don't see anybody.
All right.
Anybody making a motion to adjourn?
Second the motion to adjourn?
All in favor?
Good night,
Good night,
everybody.
everyone.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Diane.
Yeah.